Some stories don't start loud. They start with one sentence that cuts deeper than shouting ever could. A Christmas table, a 7-year-old sitting quietly, and a family deciding out loud who belongs and who doesn't. This story lives in that moment when love turns conditional and silence becomes the sharpest thing in the room. We're not here to cheer when anyone falls, and we're not here to judge people from a distance. If we listen closely, we might recognize something familiar. The way we stay quiet to keep the peace. The way we accept less so our children don't feel the tension. And the breaking point that comes when someone crosses a line in front of a child. So stay with this story. Not to pick sides, but to witness what happens when a parent stops begging to be accepted and chooses instead to protect what matters most. My name is Bowen Lockridge, and I've been carrying this family my whole life like it was my job to earn a seat at their table. If you've ever been treated like a burden by the people who were supposed to love you, I think you'll understand me. Before I tell you everything, can you do me a small favor? Drop a simple hi in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. I know it sounds small, but sometimes just knowing someone is there makes it easier to say the hard parts out loud. And if you want to stay with me through the full story, how one dinner finally snapped something in me and how I chose my daughter over a lifetime of approval, subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you think, and it tells me I'm not telling this into an empty room. Thank you. Now, let me tell you everything. I didn't drive away from my parents' house that night because I was being dramatic. I drove away because my 7-year-old was in the passenger seat with her hands folded in her lap like she was trying to take up less space in the world, and I knew if I opened my mouth I'd either break or I'd say something I couldn't unsay. That's the part people don't understand when they hear the headline version. They picture a grown man storming out. They don't picture a kid in a Christmas dress staring at her plate like it might tell her whether she deserves to be loved. Her name is Lila. She's 7. And I've spent most of her life trying to give her what I never had: one normal holiday, one safe room, one table where she wasn't treated like a mistake. My name is Bowen Lockridge. I'm 32, and for the last 6 months I've been living in the fog that comes after a funeral, after a lawsuit, after the kind of phone call that makes the whole world go silent. Evelyn, my wife, died on a job site. They called it a tragedy. The investigation called it preventable. Both words feel like knives for different reasons. Since then, life has been a series of tight breaths and careful math. Rent, groceries, school stuff. A cough that turns into a fever at the worst possible time. I learned to keep receipts for everything because grief doesn't stop the bills from showing up. And somewhere along the way, I learned that control isn't about feeling powerful. It's about not falling apart in front of your kid. That's why my apartment in Mount Pleasant looks the way it does: clean, minimal, almost too neat. No clutter, no chaos. If the counters are clear, my head is clearer. If the shoes are lined up, maybe the rest of my life won't topple. It's not a home magazine thing. It's survival. On the afternoon before Christmas, I did what I always do when I'm about to walk into something that could hurt us. I overprepared. I checked Lila's coat zipper twice, then again. I slipped tissues into the pocket, then a little travel-size bottle of kids' fever reducer, like I was packing for a hurricane. I tucked a small toy, one of those squishy little animals she likes, into her backpack, so she'd have something to squeeze if the room got sharp. I did it quietly, like if I didn't name the fear, it might not come true. Lila watched me more than she watched the TV. She's gotten like that since Evelyn died. Adults think kids don't notice the big things because they're small. Kids notice everything. They just don't have the words, so they learn patterns. They learn who gets loud and who gets quiet. They learn which rooms are safe and which rooms are a test. And Lila, my sweet, careful little girl, learned the fastest lesson of all: when people get tense, be good. Be silent. Don't take up space. Seeing that in her makes something twist in my chest every time, because it's the same lesson I learned in that same family. I told myself this Christmas would be normal. Not perfect, not magical, just normal. A couple hours at my parents' place in West Ashley, eat some dinner, smile for Lila. Let her open a gift under a tree with other people around so she doesn't have to grow up thinking holidays are just the two of us pretending we're fine. I'd promised her we'd go. I'd promised myself I wouldn't let my family ruin it. The problem is my family has never needed my permission to ruin anything. 2 days before Christmas, my sister Sloane texted the family thread, "Be here at 6. Don't be late." No heart emojis, no warmth, just a command dressed up like a plan. A minute later, she texted me directly, because she always does when she wants control without witnesses. "Hope you can manage to be on time this year." I stared at that message longer than I want to admit. Because in her world, being late isn't an accident. It's a character flaw. Proof that I'm irresponsible, unreliable, ungrateful. In my world, being late is sometimes the difference between having gas money and not. I didn't reply right away. I waited until my hands stopped shaking. Then I typed, "We'll be there." My mom, Marianne, followed up later that night with her own private message. "Bowen, don't make everything tense tomorrow. Just come be pleasant and don't start anything." There it was. The pre-blame. The advance warning that if something exploded, it would be because I lit the match even if they handed me the gasoline. I read it twice and felt that old familiar pressure settle behind my ribs, the pressure of being the designated problem in a family that needs a problem to feel clean. My dad, Graham, didn't text at all. He rarely does. Silence is his favorite language. It lets him be present without being responsible. It's also the reason Sloane can say things out loud that should make a father stand up and stop her. I used to tell myself he was tired. He worked hard. He didn't like conflict. Now I'm old enough to know those are just prettier names for the same thing: complicity. The part I didn't tell anyone because I didn't trust myself to say it without my voice changing was that I wasn't walking into that house empty-handed. For months, while Lila slept in a tangle of blankets beside me and I stared at the ceiling, lawyers and adjusters and investigators had been moving in the background of my life like slow machinery. Paperwork, calls, delays, the company dragging its feet, the insurer moving like syrup. I hired a lawyer because I couldn't carry grief and bureaucracy without coming apart. I learned to dread my phone ringing. I learned to hate the words we're still reviewing. And then, right before Christmas, something finally moved. A number appeared in my account that didn't look like mine. Not because it made me rich in a fantasy way, because it made me dangerous to the wrong kind of people. Money changes the temperature in a room. You can feel it before anyone says it out loud. The exact amount didn't matter to me in that moment the way it would matter to my family. What mattered was the weight of it, the way it sat there on my screen like a door cracking open. A way out of fear. A way to make sure Lila never again had to listen to adults argue about whether there was enough. I didn't celebrate. I didn't go shopping. I didn't tell anyone. I kept buying the same store-brand cereal and putting gas in the car $10 at a time out of habit. I kept my life looking the same because I know what my family respects. They don't respect grief. They don't respect struggle. They respect leverage. And if they smelled leverage on me, they would come sniffing like it was theirs. But I'm not proud to say my first instinct wasn't revenge. It was peace. My parents are older, still working, still drowning in debt they pretend doesn't exist. Sloane is always between opportunities in that way only people with safety nets can afford to be. Trent, Sloane's husband, has a talent for turning other people's money into his plans, and I thought stupidly dangerously maybe if I helped them, something would soften. Maybe if I handed them something real, they'd finally look at me like a son instead of a burden. Maybe if I bought the piece, it would stay bought. That's why I prepared 3 thick envelopes, the kind that don't bend easily. Each one had a name written on it in black marker: Marianne, Graham, Sloane. I didn't put Mom or Dad. I put their names because somewhere deep down I knew this wasn't about warmth. It was about terms. I slid the envelopes into the inner pocket of my coat where my hand could touch them if I needed to remind myself they were there. Not a gift. A line. A last line. I wish I could say I didn't know what I was doing, that I didn't understand how final it was. But the truth is, I did. I just didn't want to admit it. Growing up, Sloane was the miracle and I was the utility. She's 6 years older than me, which means she got to be the baby everyone fussed over while I was old enough to be helpful. If Sloane cried, the world stopped. If I cried, I was dramatic. If Sloane wanted dance lessons, she got them. If I wanted anything, I was told to be grateful for what I had. Holidays made it obvious. Sloane opened gift after gift while the adults watched her perform delight like it was a talent show. I got something practical, then a trash bag and a pointed look to clean up the wrapping paper. I didn't even know it was wrong for a long time. When you grow up inside a system, you think that's just gravity. That's just how love works. You earn it. You don't receive it. Evelyn was the first person who said that out loud to me. The first person who looked at my family dynamic and didn't laugh it off. On one of our early dates, I mentioned something my mom said to Sloane about me, and I laughed because that's what you do when you've been trained to call cruelty a joke. Evelyn didn't laugh back. She just stared at me and said, "Bowen, that's not normal." I remember feeling embarrassed, like she'd caught me doing something childish. Then she reached across the table and squeezed my hand like she was anchoring me to a new reality. "You don't have to earn basic kindness," she said. And for a few years with her, I believed it. Then she was gone, and I was back in the world where love comes with fine print. 2 days before Christmas, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. I was standing in my kitchen rinsing a cup when it buzzed in my palm. I stared at the screen until it stopped. I didn't call back right away. I'm not sure why. Maybe because every unknown number feels like a threat now. Maybe because I was tired of being pulled around by other people's timelines. 10 minutes later, Sloane texted me, "You've been hard to reach lately. You okay?" The words looked like concern. The timing felt like a knife. My stomach dropped in a slow, sick way. There had been a period after Evelyn died when some mail still went to my parents' address because that was the address on old forms, old insurance paperwork, old employment files I hadn't thought to update. Months ago, when I'd stopped by to pick up something, I'd noticed an envelope in their pile that looked official, already opened, then shoved under a catalog. I'd told myself it was none of my business. I'd told myself I was being paranoid. That memory rose up now, like a hand around my throat. Had they seen something? Had they been watching my life from the sidelines like it was a show, waiting for the moment the plot turned into money? I didn't respond to Sloane. Instead, I opened my banking app again and stared at that number. A number that would make my mother's voice go syrupy. A number that would make my sister's smile sharper. A number that would make Trent's questions turn from jokes into demands. I locked my phone and went to check Lila's coat zipper for the third time. If I focused on small things, I could pretend the big thing wasn't coming. When it was time to leave, Lila brought her little gift bag to the door and held it with both hands like it was something fragile. Her lips were pressed tight. In the mirror by the entryway, I saw myself look older than 32, not in the handsome silver fox way people joke about, in the way grief and responsibility carve you down. I knelt and adjusted Lila's scarf, then looked her in the eyes. "Hey," I said softly. "If anything feels weird tonight, you stay close to me, okay?" She nodded once, quick and serious. Too serious for 7. I grabbed my coat. My hand brushed the thick envelopes inside. For a second, I almost took them out and left them on the counter. Almost chose to walk into that house with nothing but good intentions. Then I thought about Lila's quiet nod, about my mom's message telling me not to start anything, about Sloane's timing with that text, and I slid the envelopes deeper into my pocket like I was locking a weapon away until it was needed. We got in the car. Charleston's lights blurred through the windshield like a postcard. People were out laughing, carrying wrapped boxes, living inside the story Christmas is supposed to be. I drove toward West Ashley with my jaw tight and my shoulders stiff, like my body already knew it was heading into a fight. At a red light, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Lila was staring out the window, hugging her gift bag. Her mouth was a small line. I told myself just one dinner, just a couple hours. I told myself this would be fine. But deep down in that place where you don't lie to yourself, I knew I might be driving into my parents' house for the last time as their son. By the time we pulled into my parents' driveway, the house looked like a Christmas card. Warm yellow light in the windows, a wreath on the door, inflatable reindeer on the lawn grinning like idiots. It would have been funny if it didn't make me feel sick. My family has always been good at appearances. They know how to make things look wholesome from the street. Inside is where the rules live. Inside is where you learn who matters. As soon as we stepped through the front door, the hierarchy hit us like a smell. Marianne's voice went up an octave the way it does when she wants to be heard by everyone. My babies, she sang, and she didn't mean mine. She meant Sloane's kids, who were already bouncing in the living room, tearing at bows, leaving a trail of wrapping paper like confetti. Marianne swept them into a hug that lasted long enough to be a performance, her laughter loud, her hands fussing over their hair like she was auditioning for Grandmother of the Year. Then she turned to Lila and me. Her smile stayed, but it changed temperature. She leaned down and patted Lila's head, one quick tap, like checking if a lamp works. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, and her eyes flicked past my daughter to me, already measuring what I'd bring into the room besides my presence. Lila shifted closer to my leg. Sloane appeared from the kitchen like she'd been waiting for the moment we arrived. She wore a perfect sweater dress and a smile that looked practiced. The kind that says, "I'm being reasonable," while her eyes say, "I already decided you're wrong." She looked me up and down, then looked at Lila. "Oh," she said, voice light. "Cute. Very simple." It was the same word she always uses when she wants to make you feel small without sounding cruel. Simple, like a 7-year-old should be dressed for a gala. I felt my jaw tighten. I didn't respond. I kissed the top of Lila's head and guided her toward the living room, where she immediately chose the far corner of the couch. Not the comfortable center, the corner where she could shrink. My daughter didn't plop down like a kid who feels at home. She perched like a guest who knows she could be asked to leave at any moment. That hurt more than any comment Sloane could make. Trent drifted in behind Sloane holding a drink like he'd already started relaxing in a house that was not his. He clapped me on the shoulder with the familiarity of a man who thinks proximity equals permission. "Bowen," he said, drawing my name out like it was a joke. "Look at you, still holding it down." His eyes slid down to my shoes, then back up like he was reading my finances through my outfit. "Things still tight?" he asked, and he said it with the same tone people use when they ask if you're still in that phase where you can't afford to be interesting. He chuckled like he'd been clever. I gave him a polite smile that didn't reach anything in me. "We're fine," I said. Lila's fingers tightened around the handle of her gift bag. I watched her watch him, and I could almost see the little calculations behind her eyes. Don't react. Don't give them a reason. Be good. I hated that she had those instincts. I hated that I understood them. The afternoon crawled in that way it always does in my parents' house, small talk with little barbs hidden under it. Laughter that feels like a warning. Marianne moved between the kitchen and the living room like she was conducting an orchestra, assigning tasks without asking. Sloane floated beside her like an assistant director. My dad Graham sat in his recliner with a football game on low, nodding at nothing, participating just enough to be counted as present. He smiled at the grandkids. He didn't look at me long. When he did, his eyes slid away like eye contact was a commitment he didn't want. Lila kept asking to use the bathroom even when I knew she didn't need to. It was a classic kid move. When they feel overwhelmed, find an excuse to leave the room. I walked her down the hallway the first time, and she held my hand too tight for a kid who was just going to pee. "You okay?" I whispered. She nodded quickly. "Can I stay by you?" she asked. "Always," I said, and I meant it. When we came back out, I noticed how Marianne's eyes tracked Lila, not with warmth, but with that irritated look people get when a child isn't performing the role they want. Lila wasn't being loud or rude. She was being quiet. But in my family, quiet isn't always safe. Quiet can be read as defiance if the wrong person decides it is. I tried to keep us invisible. I kept Lila close. I answered questions with short, neutral responses. I didn't give Sloane any emotion to twist. That was my strategy. Let them talk. Let them reveal themselves. Because I'd walked into that house with a suspicion I couldn't shake, and every minute inside was confirming it. The kitchen trash can was the thing that did it. Marianne asked me to bring in more ice from the garage, and when I came back through the side door, I stepped into the kitchen alone for a moment. The room smelled like roasted turkey and cinnamon. Everything looked perfect. Then my eyes caught something in the trash white paper with a clean letterhead, the corner torn off like someone had tried to destroy just enough to claim it was nothing. Official, legal, the kind of paper that doesn't come with coupons. I stared at it until my stomach went cold. My first instinct was to pretend I hadn't seen it, because confronting Marianne is like punching fog. She'll look hurt, then she'll look offended, then she'll make it my fault for noticing. But my hands moved before I could stop them. I pulled the trash bag open just enough and slid the paper out. The top line had a law firm name on it. Not my lawyer's exact letterhead, but close enough in style that my pulse spiked. There was a reference number, the kind that appears when someone is tracking a claim. The corner was ripped off right where my name would have been. I stood there holding it like evidence at a crime scene. Marianne walked in behind me carrying a platter, and the air changed immediately. "What are you doing?" she asked, too fast, too bright. I lifted the paper a fraction. "What is this?" Her face didn't change much, but her voice did. That tiny stutter you hear when someone has to pick a lie. "Oh," that she said with a dismissive laugh. "Junk mail. Some nonsense. Toss it." Junk mail doesn't have a reference number and an attorney's letterhead. She reached for it like she wanted to take it out of my hand. I didn't let her. "How did it get here?" I asked, keeping my voice low. "Bowen," she warned, and there it was, the tone that means stop asking questions. "Don't do this. Not today. Not today." Meaning she knew exactly what it was. Meaning she knew it mattered. Meaning she'd been handling my mail like it belonged to her. My heartbeat got loud in my ears. I folded the paper and slipped it into my pocket with the envelopes, and Marianne's eyes flicked to that pocket like she could see through fabric. "I don't know why you're making something out of nothing," she said. I stared at her. I almost laughed. She'd said the same sentence my whole life every time I pointed at a crack in the family and called it what it was. I walked out of the kitchen without answering. My hands were steady. My insides were not. In the hallway, I went to hang our coats on the rack. Lila was beside me, watching the living room like she was tracking danger. That's when I heard Sloane's voice from around the corner, low enough she thought I couldn't hear, sharp enough that I did. "Tonight we need to close it," she said. "Don't let him slip out of our hands." Trent chuckled quietly like it was a game. "He won't," he said. "He's predictable. Close it. Slip out of our hands. Those aren't words you use about family feelings. Those are words you use about a deal, a sale, a contract." My skin went tight. I turned my head slightly, just enough to see them through the gap between the hallway and the kitchen doorway. Sloane was leaning against the counter, scrolling her phone. Trent stood close, nodding like a man listening to a plan. Their faces weren't angry. They were focused, like this was logistics. I didn't confront them. Not yet. I let the heat in my chest settle into something colder. I adjusted Lila's coat on the hook like I hadn't heard a thing. Then as I walked back toward the living room, I passed my dad's office. The door was usually shut. It was Graham's sacred space, the room I was never supposed to enter as a kid unless summoned. That door was cracked open now, just an inch. Through that inch, I saw a thick stack of papers on the desk and a pen placed perfectly on top as if someone had arranged it for a photo. Not a messy pile. Not random mail. A set. Waiting. My mouth went dry. People don't set out a pen like that unless they expect someone to sign. I didn't step inside. I didn't touch anything. But the image branded itself into my mind. My mother had a torn legal paper in the trash. My sister was talking about closing it. My dad's desk was staged like a signing ceremony. And I had walked into this house thinking I could give my daughter one normal Christmas. I felt the old instinct to comply rise up in me, that reflex to smooth things over to keep the peace. Then I looked at Lila standing in the hallway with her shoulders slightly hunched like she was trying to disappear. That reflex died. I adjusted my strategy in real time. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to defend myself. I was going to let them show their hand. I slid the 3 thick envelopes deeper into my coat pocket so they sat against my ribs close to my heart. Not because they were sentimental, but because they were the only control I had left in that house. I told myself, if they try to paint this as boundaries, I'll show them what boundaries really look like. If they try to shame me, I'll stay calm. If they try to make me beg, I won't. Because my kid is watching. The living room filled up as the sun went down. More food came out. More noise. Marianne called everyone to the table like she was calling actors to their marks. Sloane took her seat across from me, smiling like she'd already won. Trent sat beside her, his knee bouncing with restless confidence. Graham sat at the head, quiet as ever. Lila sat close to my side, small hands, folded eyes on her plate. I placed my hand on her thigh under the table, a steady pressure meant to say I'm here. She flinched at first, then relaxed when she realized it was me. Sloane lifted her glass and laughed at something one of her kids said, and for a second the scene almost looked normal almost. Then she set her fork down gently like she was placing a gavel on a bench. Her voice was calm. Too calm. Before we eat, she said, there are a few family things we need to agree on. Lila's leg trembled under my hand. I felt it through her tights like a pulse. I kept my face neutral. I breathed in slowly. I thought about the staged pen in Graham's office. I thought about the torn letterhead in Marianne's trash. I thought about Sloane's words, close it, don't let him slip out of our hands. And I knew the real dinner hadn't even started yet. Sloane's voice landed over the table like a lid snapping shut. Before we eat, she said, there are a few family things we need to agree on. The turkey sat in the center like a prop skin, browned and glossy, steam still rising. Marianne's good china lined up like we were about to have a Norman Rockwell moment. But nothing in that room felt warm. It felt staged. Sloane sat directly across from me, posture-perfect hands folded, the picture of calm authority. Marianne angled herself beside her like a loyal witness. Graham occupied the head of the table with the distant gaze of a man who'd rather negotiate with mashed potatoes than with his own children. Trent leaned back in his chair, loose-limbed and confident, a grin already forming as if he could smell a show coming. Lila sat to my right. So small at that long table it looked wrong, like someone had put a child-sized chair in a room built for adults to dominate. I kept my hand resting on her thigh under the table, steady pressure and anchor. I didn't look at Sloane first. I looked at my daughter. Her eyes were down. Not asleep down. Escape down. She'd started sorting peas into a tiny line, then breaking the line and starting over, her little fingers moving with careful precision. Counting without counting out loud. A silent math problem to keep her mind from hearing what her heart already feared. Marianne began with the soft blade. Bowen, she said, dragging my name through a smile. You look tired. The way she said it made tired sound like a moral failure. Like I'd chosen grief for attention. Long day, Trent chuckled before I answered. Or long year. He lifted his glass and took a slow sip, eyes on me like he was waiting for me to flinch. Sloane tilted her head toward Lila's dress. Cute, she said. Very simple. Simple. Again. Like my daughter's worth could be measured in sequins. I felt heat rise behind my ribs, hot and fast, the old reflex to defend myself, to explain, to earn mercy. I swallowed it. We're fine. I said the same 2 words I'd been using for months. Fine is what you say when you can't afford the truth. Marianne sighed like I'd disappointed her by not being more entertaining. Well, she said, we just want tonight to be pleasant. Pleasant. Her favorite word for silence, for compliance. For me not ruining whatever story she planned to tell later about her perfect family Christmas. Sloane's fork clicked against her plate, a small sound that still managed to shut the room up. Let's not dance around it, she said. It's been a lot. And Mom and Dad agree. She didn't look at them when she said it. She didn't need to. Their support was implied by their stillness. Graham didn't lift his eyes. Marianne didn't protest. Trent nodded at nothing like a man approving a meeting agenda. My stomach tightened. I knew this kind of conversation. The kind where I'm not allowed to have feelings, and if I do, I get called dramatic. The kind where boundaries are something other people set on me, not something I'm allowed to set back. "What are you doing?" I asked quietly, keeping my voice low for Lila's sake. Sloane's smile widened in a way that wasn't warmth. It was certainty. "We've all decided," she said, "that it's best if you leave." I blinked once, like my body was buying time. "Leave," I repeated. "Like, leave the table," Trent snorted. Marianne's lips twitched like she was trying not to laugh. Sloane leaned back and crossed her arms. "Leave the house," she said, "and don't come back." The words were clean rehearsed, delivered like a line she'd practiced in the mirror. Lila's fingers stopped moving. She lifted her head just enough to look at me, eyes wide but dry, like she'd learned tears don't help in this room. Marianne slid in immediately, unable to let Sloane have the spotlight for more than 2 seconds. "Christmas is so much better without you," she said almost gently, like she was talking about a candle scent she didn't like. The room went quiet in that thick, deliberate way families get quiet when they're waiting for someone to beg, when they're waiting for me to beg. I looked at Graham. For a second, just a second, I thought he might do it. Might clear his throat, say, "Hold on," say, "That's enough," say something that would make him a father instead of furniture. He didn't. He stared at his plate like the gravy had become fascinating. His silence landed like a stamp. Approved. Final. Something in my chest cracked, not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, politely, like I'd been trained to break. I had 2 choices. I could do the old routine. I could plead. I could explain my finances, my grief, my exhaustion. I could remind them that Evelyn died and I'm raising Lila alone and I'm doing my best. I could try to win a seat at a table that had always treated me like a guest. Or I could stop auditioning. I set my fork down. The metal touched the plate with a soft clink that felt louder than it should have. I turned to Lila and kept my voice calm, almost gentle. "Honey," I said, "can you go grab your coat and your little backpack?" Marianne's eyebrows rose. Sloane looked pleased, like I'd just proven she was right. Trent's grin widened, ready for the show. Lila didn't hesitate. She slid out of her chair and walked toward the hallway with the quiet speed of a kid who's been waiting for permission to escape. That hit me harder than anything else. My daughter was relieved to leave. She'd been carrying this discomfort longer than I wanted to admit. As soon as she disappeared around the corner, the room shifted like a stage changing sets. Sloane exhaled like a task had been completed. "Good," she said. "That settles it." Trent leaned back and gave a satisfied little sigh. Marianne dabbed her mouth with her napkin, the picture of composure. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," she said to me, like I was the one causing harm. I stared at them, all of them, and felt my face do something I didn't plan. It smiled. Not a friendly smile. The kind of smile you make when you realize you've been trying to win a rigged game. "Okay," I said. Sloane's shoulders loosened, smugness settling in. "Finally," she murmured. I stood slowly, pushing my chair back. The legs scraped the floor, and I could feel Trent watching me like he was waiting for a tantrum, waiting for the moment he could point and say, "See, this is why we set boundaries." I didn't give him that. I walked toward the kitchen doorway and stopped. My coat was still on my chair. The inner pocket pressed against my side, 3 thick envelopes, heavy as choices. I stepped into the kitchen and went straight to the cupboard near the end of the counter, the one Marianne kept for platters and holiday serving trays. Earlier, while everyone was busy in the living room, I'd slipped the envelopes behind a stack of those trays, hidden like a secret I wasn't sure I deserved to have. I'd told myself I was waiting for the right moment. Turns out the right moment was the moment they told my child she didn't belong. I reached in and pulled them out. 3 crisp pieces of heavy paper inside thick envelopes, each labeled in black marker like a courtroom exhibit. Marianne. Graham. Sloane. I set them on the counter in a neat row, the way you set down something fragile that can still cut. Sloane followed me in curiosity, replacing smugness. "What is that?" she demanded. Trent leaned in behind her. "Are those cards?" He scoffed. Marianne actually laughed. A sharp little laugh like she couldn't help herself. Rachel behavior, she muttered, then caught herself like she almost used the wrong name for the role I'd played my whole life, the dramatic one. Graham stood in the doorway, finally paying attention. "If you're trying to guilt us," he said flatly, "don't." I met his eyes for the first time all night. "Oh," I said, still smiling, "this isn't guilt." I tapped the envelopes lightly with my fingertip. "This is just consequences." Sloane's jaw tightened. "You think we need your gifts?" she snapped. "You think we're going to miss whatever little pity thing you brought?" Trent laughed too loud. "Yeah, Bowen," he said, "you're not exactly Santa." Marianne waved a hand. "This is ridiculous," she said. "You're proving our point." I didn't argue. I didn't defend. I picked up the envelope labeled Marianne and tore it straight down the middle. The rip was soft, but in that kitchen it sounded like a gunshot. Marianne's laugh died mid-breath. "Bowen," she warned, her voice changing. I picked up the envelope labeled Graham and tore it next slow and clean, like I was returning his silence to him in a form he couldn't ignore. Graham's face tightened, something like panic flickering behind his eyes before he crushed it. Trent stopped laughing. He sat up a little straighter, like his brain had finally loaded. Sloane stepped closer, eyes locked on the torn edges. "Stop it," she hissed. "What are you doing?" I didn't answer. I picked up the envelope labeled Sloane, and this time I didn't hesitate at all. I tore it in one decisive motion and laid the pieces down in 3 neat piles, one for each of them, like offerings they didn't deserve. There was a beat of silence where nobody moved. Then Trent barked out a laugh that sounded forced and wrong. "Okay," he said. "That's insane." Sloane's voice went sharp. "You're unhinged." "This is exactly why we said." Marianne shook her head slowly, like she was watching a stranger. "See," she whispered, "see what we deal with." I turned and walked back toward the hallway. Lila stood there already in her coat, tiny backpack on her shoulders, her hands folded in front of her like she was ready for a fire drill. She looked up at me with wide eyes, but she didn't look surprised. That was the part that hurt the most. I took her hand. "We're going," I said softly. We walked out the front door, and the cold air hit my face hard enough to wake me up. As we stepped down the porch stairs, I glanced back through the window without meaning to. Inside, they were still in the kitchen, staring at the counter. And then I saw it. Marianne leaned forward and picked up one torn piece, her fingers trembling. Graham moved closer, his mouth slightly open. Sloane snatched a piece and started pressing it together like a puzzle, frantic. Their faces changed in real time, smug to confused, confused to pale, pale to panicked. Marianne's mouth opened wide. I couldn't hear her at first through the glass. Then the front door flew open behind us. "Bowen." Marianne's voice cracked, suddenly raw. Footsteps pounded the porch, fast and clumsy. "Wait," Sloane shrieked, barefoot on the cold pavement. "Wait, come back." Trent's voice bellowed from behind them like he thought volume could undo what paper couldn't. "Hold up, man." Graham sounded different too. Not quiet, not resigned. "Bowen," he called. "Stop. Stop and talk." Lila's hand tightened in mine as we reached the car. I opened the passenger door for her, still holding her hand until she was inside. Marianne rushed up to my side of the car, eyes wild. "Please," she cried. "Please, you can't." Sloane shoved in beside her, breath steaming. "Fix it," she demanded. Then her voice broke. "Just fix it." Graham stood a few feet back, chest heaving, looking older than I'd ever seen him look. Trent hovered behind them, suddenly unsure, like a bully who realizes the kid he's been pushing has something sharp in his pocket. 5 minutes ago, they told me Christmas was better without me. Now they were begging me to undo something they couldn't even say out loud. I slid into the driver's seat. Lila stared straight ahead, pale in the dashboard light. The phone in my pocket buzzed again, as if the house itself was trying to reach through fabric and grab me back. I started the engine. I didn't roll down the window. I didn't give them a speech. I just backed out of the driveway and drove away while their silhouettes shrank in the mirror arms, waving mouths, moving the perfect family Christmas shattering behind them in warm yellow light. The highway swallowed us fast. Charleston fell away into dark trees and scattered streetlights, rain starting as a thin mist that smeared the world into soft streaks. The wipers kept time like a metronome. I kept both hands on the wheel and my eyes forward because if I looked at Lila too long, I might not be able to keep my voice steady. My phone buzzed in my pocket like a trapped insect non-stop. I didn't answer. I didn't even take it out. Every ring felt like a hook. Every vibration felt like fingers grabbing for my ankle. I wasn't going to let them pull us back into that house, not tonight, not ever. Dad, Lila's voice was quiet, almost swallowed by the hum of the road. I glanced at her without turning my head too much. She sat with her backpack on her lap like it was armor. Her coat was zipped all the way up. Her small hands were folded knuckles white. "Yeah, baby," I said. There was a pause and I could hear her trying to make her words come out right. "Where are we going?" The question should have been simple. It hit me like a punch anyway, because I didn't know. Home was 2 hours back toward Mount Pleasant. I'd planned to stay at my parents' house overnight. That had been the whole thing: Christmas Eve together, sleepover, wake up to pancakes, try to give Lila the holiday she deserved. Now that plan was ash, and I was driving through wet darkness with a 7-year-old who'd just watched her grandmother smile while saying Christmas was better without her. I tightened my grip on the wheel until my fingers ached. "We're gonna find a place to sleep," I said carefully, "just for tonight." Lila nodded once like she'd expected that answer. Like she'd already adapted. That made my throat burn. I drove until the exit signs started to look familiar in a different way, not home familiar, just practical familiar. A hotel off the highway, not a sketchy motel with flickering lights, but a real place with a bright lobby and a clean parking lot. I wanted warmth. I wanted safety. If I couldn't give my daughter a loving family tonight, I could at least give her a door that locked and a bed that wasn't in a house where she had to earn permission to exist. The lobby smelled like coffee and pine cleaner. A Christmas tree stood in the corner with soft white lights. The woman at the front desk smiled when she saw Lila. Not the tight smile my mother uses when she's performing. A real one, like she was genuinely happy a kid had walked into her night. "Hey there," she said to Lila. "You want hot chocolate or milk?" Lila blinked, surprised by the question, like it hadn't occurred to her that an adult might offer her something without making her feel like it was a favor she needed to repay. "Hot chocolate," she whispered. The woman laughed softly. "Hot chocolate it is." She slid a little cup across the counter and added a candy cane. I thanked her, my voice coming out rough. We got a room with 2 beds. When the door clicked shut behind us, the silence felt different than it had in my parents' house. Not heavy. Not waiting. Just quiet. Lila kicked off her shoes and climbed onto one of the beds like she'd been holding her breath all day. I sat on the edge of the other bed and stared at my hands, still half expecting a fork to be in them, still half feeling the weight of those envelopes against my ribs. For a minute, neither of us spoke. Then Lila said very softly, like she was confessing something she'd been scared to admit, "Grandma doesn't like me." I felt something squeeze tight behind my eyes. "Lila." I started automatically reaching for the adult line, the protective lie. "That's not true." "Yes, it is," she said, not angry, just certain. "She likes Sloane's kids." She paused, then corrected herself like she'd been counting evidence. "She likes them more." The hot chocolate cup warmed my hands. It didn't warm the room. "Why do you think that?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay calm. Lila shrugged one shoulder, the kind of shrug kids do when they've already accepted unfairness and are just trying to map it. "She hugs them first," she said. "She gives them the good presents. She says their names with a happy voice." She looked down at the blanket, picking at a loose thread. "When she says my name, it's like when you call the dog to move." The words landed and stayed there, ugly and true. I wanted to drive back and smash every wreath on that front door. I wanted to march into that kitchen and make them say it out loud. Yes, we treated a child like she was inconvenient. Instead, I took a slow breath and reached for Lila's hand. "That's not your fault," I said. "You didn't do anything wrong." Lila looked at me, eyes steady. "I know," she said, and then her voice got smaller. "But I still don't like it." I squeezed her hand. "Me either," I whispered. I tried to give her something better than comfort, Something true. You don't ever have to make people like you by being quiet, I told her. You don't have to be perfect to deserve love. You can be loud. You can be messy. You can be you. Lila stared at me for a long moment like she was testing whether the words were real. Then she said the sentence that cracked me open. But you do, she said. You always do. I went still. Because she wasn't wrong. Kids don't miss the patterns. They absorb them. They watch who apologizes first. They watch who gets blamed. They watch who swallows pain and calls it peace. I'd been swallowing pain my whole life. I'd taught her without meaning to. My chest tightened until it hurt. Lila, I said, and my voice shook despite my best effort. I'm sorry. She blinked, confused. Why I pulled her into my arms, her small body warm and light against mine. Because I let you see that I whispered into her hair. I let you sit at that table and feel like you had to disappear. Her little arms wrapped around my neck, trusting me anyway. That trust wrecked me. Can we watch a movie, she asked after a moment, her voice muffled against my shoulder. The simplest request in the world. A kid request. A normal request. It felt like a lifeline. Yeah, I said, wiping my face with the back of my hand when she wasn't looking. We can watch whatever you want. We ate vending machine snacks on the bed and watched a Christmas movie where everyone learns the meaning of family. Lila laughed at the silly parts. I laughed too, but it came out thin like my body didn't remember how to do it right yet. My phone sat on the nightstand buzzing itself to death. Marianne, Sloan, Trent. Calls stacking, voicemails piling up. I ignored it while Lila was awake. I didn't want their voices in this room. I didn't want their panic to mix with my daughter's hot chocolate and cartoon laughter. When Lila finally fell asleep, sprawled sideways like a starfish, I sat in the dark with the TV muted and stared at my phone until the screen dimmed. It buzzed again. I answered because at some point you can only dodge so long before the thing you're dodging becomes a different kind of danger. Hello, I said quietly. Bo and Marianne's voice burst into my ear, too bright, too high, like she'd been crying and was trying to hide it. Oh, thank God. Where are you? Are you safe? Is Lila okay? The concern lasted exactly as long as it took for her to realize I was listening. We're fine, I said flatly. Bowen, please. She rushed. We didn't mean it. You know we didn't mean it. In the background, I heard Sloane's voice, sharp and furious. Tell him to come back. Another voice, Graham, low and tense. Put it on speaker. Marianne hesitated, then I heard the click. Bowen, Graham said, and his tone made my stomach twist. Not apology. Command. This is ridiculous. Come back here and fix this. Sloane cut in. Yeah, stop acting like some martyr. You're ruining Christmas. Trent laughed in the background, a short, brittle sound. Man, just undo it, he said like I'd broken a toy and needed to put it back together. I stared at my daughter sleeping under a hotel blanket and felt something in me go cold and steady. You already ruined Christmas, I said quietly. You told me to leave and never return with my kids sitting right there. Emotions were high, Marianne said fast. You know how your sister gets? I do, I said. I know exactly how Sloane gets, and I know exactly how you get. Silence, brief and charged. Then Sloane snapped. Don't do that. Don't talk like you're above this. I came to give, I said, and the words tasted strange because I hadn't meant to say them out loud. I didn't come to ask you for anything. I came to help you, and you treated me like I showed up to beg. Sloane's breath hitched just barely. Graham's voice rose. What you did was sick. You don't tear something up and walk away. You can redo it. You can write it again right now. There it was. Not an apology, not a question about Lila, a demand. Redo it. Write it again. Right now. Marianne's voice cracked. Bowen, please. Please just fix it. I took a slow breath. No, I said. The word came out calm, almost gentle, which shocked even me. Not tonight. Not after what you said. Bowen, Marianne whispered, panic thick. Please. No, I repeated. and this time it felt like a door locking from the inside. Good night. I ended the call and set the phone face down. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear in a way it hadn't been in months. Outside cars hissed on wet pavement. Inside, my daughter slept safe. And somewhere in my parents' house, they were staring at torn pieces of paper and realizing they hadn't been begging for their son. They'd been begging for whatever they thought he was worth. Morning came too fast. Hotel curtains never quite blocked the light, and the thin strip of gray along the edge of the window felt like it was prying my eyes open before I was ready. For a few seconds, I forgot where we were, forgot the driveway, the torn paper, the shouting. Then Lila shifted in her bed, sighed in her sleep, and everything settled back into place with a dull thud. I got up quietly, pulled on yesterday's clothes, and stood by the window watching cars move through the wet parking lot like nothing in the world had changed. That's the strange thing about fallout. It's always personal. The rest of the world keeps going. I woke Lila gently, keeping my voice soft, neutral, like this was just another school morning. She sat up without complaint, rubbed her eyes, and asked if she could wear her hoodie instead of the dress she'd worn the night before. I said yes immediately. I didn't need her wearing anything that reminded her of that table. We checked out, thanked the front desk woman again, and got back on the road. I didn't talk much on the drive. I didn't trust myself to. Lila hummed along quietly to the radio, then went silent again, her hand resting on the door handle like she needed to know where the exit was. When we pulled up to her school, everything looked painfully normal. Parents in puffer jackets, kids with backpacks too big for their bodies, a banner wishing everyone happy holidays. Lila lingered longer than usual before getting out of the car. She leaned over and hugged me tight around the neck. "You'll be here," she said, not a question, a statement she needed to hear out loud. "I'll be right here," I said. She nodded, then hesitated, then finally walked toward the doors without looking back. I watched until she disappeared inside. Only then did I let myself breathe. The first call came before I even started the engine, a number I hadn't seen in years. An aunt on my dad's side. "Bowen," she said without greeting, voice already heavy with judgment. "What on earth happened last night?" "Your mother was crying." I closed my eyes. "Good morning to you too," I said. She huffed. "That's not funny. Family is family. You can't just storm out and humiliate your parents." There it was, the version of the story already fully formed. I said nothing. She filled the silence with her own certainty. "You need to apologize." I ended the call. Another one rang through immediately. A cousin. Then another. Messages started piling up. "Heard you made your mom cry. Heard you lost it. Heard you embarrassed everyone." Each one followed the same script. No questions, no curiosity, just conclusions. I realized with a cold clarity that this wasn't a trickle of gossip. It was a release. Someone had opened a valve, and the story was pouring out fast, already shaped, already framed. By the time I drove back to Mount Pleasant, my phone felt heavier than my wallet ever had when I was counting dollars. I dropped my keys on the counter, kicked off my shoes, and stood in my quiet apartment while the buzzing continued. The silence of the room made the voices louder in my head. I checked my phone again and saw a notification that made my stomach drop. Sloan had posted. I didn't open it right away. I stood there staring at the screen like it might bite me. Then I opened it. The photo was perfect. Sloan standing in my parents' living room tree, glowing behind her, Trent's arm around her waist, Marianne in the background, holding a mug like she was in a lifestyle ad. The caption was long, carefully written. She talked about boundaries, about difficult conversations, about how hard it is to love someone who refuses to take responsibility. She didn't use my name at first. She let people lean in. Then she did. "Bowen showed up last night looking for sympathy," she wrote. "When we finally set healthy boundaries, he reacted badly and stormed out. Healthy boundaries." I almost laughed. Then she went for the part she knew would stick. "And yes, before anyone asks," she wrote, "Bowen recently received a very large payout related to Evelyn's passing and still refused to help our parents. Some people would rather punish their own family than act like a decent human being." I felt my hands go cold. She'd done it. She'd taken my wife's death and turned it into a moral test I was supposedly failing. She'd framed my refusal to be controlled as greed. She'd made sure anyone reading would come away thinking I was hoarding blood money while my poor parents suffered. Comments were already flooding in. So sad. Praying for your parents. Family is everything. Family is... I always wondered about him. Poor Marianne. I set the phone down like it burned. My chest felt tight like there wasn't enough air in the room. Then another notification buzzed. An email from someone at work. Nothing accusatory, just careful. Hey, just wanted to check in. Heard some things. Hope you're okay. That was worse than anger. That was concern laced with doubt. The story was leaking out of the family bubble and into my real life. I sat at the table and put my head in my hands. For a moment the old instinct flared. Stay quiet. Don't make it worse. Let it blow over. I'd lived my whole life that way, letting other people narrate me into something smaller than I was. Then I thought about Lila's hand gripping my shirt in the hallway. I thought about the way she'd asked if I would still be there when school ended. Silence had never protected me. Silence had just made me easier to use. The pressure ramped up by the afternoon. A parent I vaguely knew from school drop-off made a comment that sounded innocent but wasn't. Kids pick up on stress, you know, she said, glancing at Lila like she was diagnosing something. A kid in Lila's class asked her why her grandma didn't want her at Christmas. That one came home with her clinging to her words, confusion and hurt tangled together. I knelt in front of her, heart breaking all over again, and told her that grown-ups sometimes say cruel things when they want control, and that it never means the child did anything wrong. She nodded, but she didn't look convinced. That night after Lila fell asleep, I stopped pretending this was just noise. I sat at the table and started documenting. I took screenshots of Sloane's post. I saved the comments before they could disappear. I wrote down the times of calls, the names, the phrases they used. I scrolled back through my bank app farther than I ever had before, month by month, the same small transfers I'd sent my parents for years, without ever mentioning publicly. $200, sometimes more. Always on time. I remembered the Facebook post Marianne had made months ago, the one with the sad emoji and the caption about stepping up for family when it's hard. I found it. I stared at it for a long time. The hypocrisy sat there in plain text. That was the moment something clicked into place. Sloane's story had a weak spot. She'd said I never helped. She'd said my parents carried me. And I had proof that the opposite was true. Not opinions, not feelings. Proof. This wasn't about arguing anymore. This was about facts. I set rules for myself before I did anything else. I would not rant. I would not insult. I would not drag anyone through the mud with emotion. I would state what happened when it happened and show what was true. I opened my notes app and typed the outline in short, clean sentences. 3 lines about Christmas. 1 line about my daughter hearing everything. A series of screenshots that spoke for themselves. I stared at the evidence laid out neatly on my screen and felt the weight of the choice. Once I posted this, there would be no pretending we could go back to before. Tears and baked goods wouldn't fix it. They would come harder. I knew that. I took a breath and closed the app without posting. Not yet. I wanted one more night of quiet with my daughter before the storm hit again. The next morning I woke up with a strange sense of calm, like the decision had already been made somewhere deeper than thought. I packed Lila's lunch, tied her shoes, walked her to school, and waited until I saw her disappear through the doors before I sat back in the car and pulled out my phone. I opened the post editor and typed slowly. "This isn't a rant," I wrote. "This is simply the truth." Then I listed what happened exactly as it happened. Christmas dinner. Sloane told me to leave and never return. Marianne said Christmas was better without me. Graham said nothing. My 7-year-old daughter heard all of it. I attached the screenshots of the transfers, each one dated consistent, boring in their regularity. I attached Marianne's old post beneath them. I added one final line. For years I helped quietly. I never posted about it. The one time I needed space to protect my child, I was painted as a villain. I didn't tag anyone. I didn't add emojis. I hit post. Then I locked my phone and drove home. It didn't take long. Within an hour, the comments under Sloane's post started changing tone. People asked questions. Someone wrote, "Wait, he was sending them money every month." Another said, "Why would you kick a child out?" A relative I'd always respected commented publicly that what happened was shameful. I watched as Sloane edited her caption, then edited it again, then started deleting comments in chunks. But screenshots don't disappear once they spread. My phone buzzed with private messages, some apologetic, some stunned, some silent acknowledgments that they'd believed the wrong story. Then the tone shifted again. Sloane posted a follow-up, this one shorter, sharper. She implied I wasn't stable. That grief had changed me. That maybe I needed help. It was subtle enough to sound concerned, but pointed enough to plant doubt. I felt a familiar flicker of fear. That kind of suggestion can cost you everything if it sticks. I didn't respond publicly. I didn't need to. My phone lit up with messages I hadn't expected. People telling me to be careful. People telling me to save everything. Then came the private texts from my family. Marianne first. "Bowen, what do you want? Just tell us, and we can fix this." Fix. Always that word. Graham followed. "This has gone far enough. Take it down and we'll talk." Then Sloane. "We don't need to do this publicly. We can figure out how to divide things if you just stop." There it was, naked and undeniable. I took screenshots of every message noting the time, the order, the shift from outrage to bargaining. I forwarded copies to an email account I'd created just for this. I wasn't being paranoid. I was being careful. By late afternoon, I thought the worst of it was contained to screens. Then the doorbell rang. I froze. Lila was on the living room floor coloring, humming softly. The sound cut through the apartment like a blade. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. Marianne stood there holding a cake in a plastic dome. Graham beside her, hands in his coat pockets. Sloane slightly behind them, Trent hovering like backup. Marianne smiled too wide when she saw the camera light. "We just want to talk," she called. "We brought something for Lila." I felt my jaw set. I didn't open the door. I took a slow breath and looked back at my daughter. She stood up, clutching her coloring book, eyes flicking between me and the door. I knelt in front of her. "Stay right here," I said quietly. She nodded, fear and curiosity warring on her face. I turned back to the door. "You need to leave," I said through the wood, my voice steady. Marianne's smile faltered. "Don't be like this," she said. "It's Christmas." Sloane's voice cut in sharper. "We're doing this for her." Trent added, "Family forgives, man." I rested my hand on the lock and felt the solid weight of it under my palm. Lila's small hand slid into my shirt from behind, gripping the fabric like an anchor. I looked down at her, at the trust in her eyes, at the way she waited for me to choose. The doorbell rang again, more insistent this time. "Just open the door," Marianne pleaded. "Just talk." I didn't move. I knew then, with a certainty that felt almost peaceful, that whatever came next would define the rest of our lives. And I wasn't choosing comfort. I was choosing my child. I stood with my hand resting against the door frame, close enough to the lock that I could feel the cold metal through the wood. Through the peephole, I could see all of them clearly arranged like they'd rehearsed it. Marianne front and center cake held at chest-level frosting, smoothed perfectly like proof of good intentions. Sloane a half step to the side, angled just enough to look cooperative rather than confrontational. Trent behind her, arms loose posture, casual in that way men adopt when they expect to back someone else's authority. Graham stood off to the other side, shoulders squared, face set, his silence heavier than any words he could have used. I didn't open the door. I didn't need to. I turned slightly so my body blocked the hallway behind me, putting myself between them and Lila without making a show of it. She was close enough that I could feel the small pressure of her fingers curled into the back of my shirt. Marianne leaned toward the door, her voice climbing into that sugary register she reserved for public moments. "Lila, sweetheart," she called loud enough that the neighbors could hear if they were listening. "Come give Grandma a hug." Lila didn't move. I felt her grip tighten, her body shift backward instead of forward. That reaction told me everything I needed to know. Sloane noticed it immediately. Her eyes flicked to the door, then narrowed. "See what you've done?" she said sharply. "You've scared her. You've poisoned her against us." I opened the door just enough to be heard clearly, not enough to give them space. "No," I said. "I didn't poison anything. You told me to leave and never come back. You said Christmas was better without me. You said it in front of my child." Marianne's smile faltered for half a second before she forced it back into place. "We were upset," she said quickly. "Emotions were high. You know how things get." "I know exactly how things get," I said, "and that's why you're not coming in." Graham finally spoke, his voice low-controlled. "You're taking this too far. You're using one night to punish your family." I met his gaze through the glass. Punishment is throwing a child out of a home. This is consequence. The word landed harder than I expected. Marianne's tone shifted, the sweetness draining away. "What do you want, Bowen?" she asked. "Just tell us. We can fix this." There it was. Not remorse, negotiation. Sloane stepped in smoothly. "We're adults. We can talk numbers. We can figure out something fair." Trent nodded, adding family sacrifices for each other. "Don't burn everything down over pride." Graham exhaled sharply. "Do you have any idea what this is doing to us?" he said. "Do you know how much damage you're causing?" I didn't answer right away. I glanced down and felt Lila's forehead press lightly against my back, her breath warm through my shirt. "You still haven't asked how she is," I said. Graham's jaw tightened. "That's not the point." And there it was. Sloane's patience cracked next. "You're not well," she said, her voice dropping into something colder. "Anyone can see that. You should talk to someone. This kind of behavior isn't stable." Trent shifted his weight. "Don't make us do this the hard way," he added quietly. The threat sat there unwrapped. I felt my pulse thud in my ears, but my voice stayed even. "You don't get to come into my home," I said. "You don't get access to my daughter. Any contact from here on out goes through writing. If you show up again, I'll treat it as harassment. The camera's been recording this entire time." Marianne's eyes flicked upward, panic flashing across her face. "Bowen, please," she said, voice breaking at last. "Just open the door." I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I closed it, not hard, not dramatically. I turned the lock and felt it slide into place with a solid final click. I knelt down in front of Lila and placed my hands on her shoulders. "You're safe," I said quietly. "No one gets to make you feel unwanted again." She nodded once, then wrapped her arms around my neck. After their footsteps faded, I pulled up the doorbell footage and saved it, then backed up the messages they'd sent afterward, the ones that talked about fixing things and undoing what I'd done. One voicemail from Marianne stood out. She didn't mention Lila once. She mentioned how close they'd been, how much help they'd almost had the exact figure slipping out before she caught herself. I sat down on the kitchen floor, phone in my hand, and understood something with painful clarity. This wasn't over until the truth was finished being told. Time passed in small, deliberate steps. Weeks folded into months. I rebuilt our days piece by piece, the way you rebuild after a storm when you can't afford another collapse. Lila's mornings became predictable again. Breakfast at the same time, the same drive to school, the same seat at the table where she could see the window. I kept my phone out of sight as much as possible, silenced notifications, filtered messages. I watched the tension leave her shoulders slowly, like air escaping a tight knot. She slept deeper. She laughed without checking the room first. She stopped asking when we were going back to her grandparents' house. When she did mention them, it was soft, cautious, like testing a bruise. I never lied to her. I just told her the truth in pieces she could carry. I organized everything the way I'd learned to do in the months after Evelyn died. Chronological, clean. Screenshots, dates, statements, footage. I didn't post constantly. I didn't argue online. I kept the record ready in case it was needed. When rumors resurfaced, I shared facts privately and shut the door again. Eventually, the noise dulled. People lost interest when the story stopped changing. I made one final public clarification, brief and unembellished. I stated the settlement amount plainly, without drama, without apology. I explained what it was: compensation for a preventable loss, not luck, not a reward. I said that before Christmas I had planned to help my parents substantially to clear their debts and stabilize their future. I said that plan ended the moment my daughter was told she didn't belong. I didn't insult anyone. I didn't need to. The truth did its own work. Then I moved on. I bought a modest home in my own name, close enough to Lila's school that she could ride her bike on quiet afternoons. I set up her college fund, an emergency account, and long-term investments designed to grow slowly and safely. I didn't chase anything flashy. I chased stability. Through distant relatives and second-hand updates, I heard what happened to them. The house sold. Retirement plans unraveled. Sloan stopped posting family photos and pivoted to vague quotes about betrayal and resilience. Marianne and Graham told anyone who would listen how close they'd been to help, how unfair it all was. What they never said, not once, was that they were sorry for what they'd said to a child. That absence told me everything. I still miss Evelyn. That grief didn't evaporate. Some mornings it still hits hard, sudden and sharp. Money didn't fix that. What it did was remove the fear that had wrapped itself around my chest, the fear that I would have to choose between survival and dignity. I chose my daughter. I chose safety over approval. One evening I stood in the kitchen of our new place while Lila ran down the hallway laughing, calling my name without hesitation, without shrinking herself first. I leaned against the counter and let the quiet settle. It wasn't perfect. It was enough. And for the first time I knew I would never go back to that table, and I didn't need to be invited to feel whole. When the noise finally fades, what stays with us isn't the argument or the money or who stood where. What stays is the quiet understanding that some moments change the shape of our lives forever. We don't always recognize them when they arrive. Sometimes they look like loss. Sometimes they sound like rejection. But later, when we breathe again, we realize those moments were asking us a single hard question about who we're willing to protect and what we're willing to let go of. If this story leaves anything behind, I hope it's this gentle thought we can hold together for a moment. That compassion doesn't always look like forgiveness, and strength doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it's choosing safety over approval. Sometimes it's choosing peace over being understood. And sometimes it's accepting that we can't save every relationship without losing ourselves in the process. None of that makes anyone a villain. It just makes us human, trying to do our best with the hands we were dealt. If you're still here with me, thank you for listening all the way through. And if this story stirred something in you, memories, questions, or a feeling you haven't named yet, you're welcome to leave a few lines in the comments, only if you feel like it. This space isn't about judgment. It's about listening and knowing we're not alone in what we carry. And if you'd like to be part of a quiet community where stories like this are shared and held with care, you can subscribe and stay with us. I'm grateful you spent this time here. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you again soon.